All right, so before we start talking about possible solutions and whatnot, let's dive into the question of why does this matter at all. So first of all, the talk is about LLMs and not AI. That was selected on purpose because nowadays basically everyone that is talking about AI or labeling their products with AI ultimately also mean that they're utilizing the killer use case of AIs, which is these large language models such as ChatGPT and whatnot. So one of the impacts that these LLMs have on us is already very visible for all the knowledge workers, but it doesn't stop there. So basically, all of the jobs out there will be impacted. And I keep on having these kind of conversations with friends. Like, for instance, I had a conversation with a teacher, and I asked her, how do you go about AI with your colleagues? How do you approach this? And she said, you know what? We ignore it entirely because we're working with children and the human factor there matters the most, so AI will never be able to replace that. And I thought, okay, that is quite an interesting stance. But after digging a little bit into this topic, I found out that, well, actually even those jobs that are dealing with humans do have to think about how to apply and use this technology for their context. There has been a publication into Nature about a study that they conducted, and the study went as follows. You had a conversation with first a professional psychologist, and then you had a conversation with a chatbot, basically an LLM, right? Two groups of people. One group knew that they were talking to chatbots for the second session, and the other group did not. And it turns out that for both groups, they were happier and felt more kind of listened to when talking to AI. So ultimately, what this leads to is also the fact that people are sharing more personal information with these LLMs, which again has an implication on how that information is then being used later on. Talking with somebody else who was in the construction business said, you know, AI will never be able to start replacing my job because we do physical work, right? And I thought, okay, fair enough. I can understand that. But then you start seeing all these push for robotics now that is really having a new revolution where you have humanoids popping up. Already today, you can buy this one for quite an affordable price, right? And you can look it up on YouTube. You will see this robot dancing, doing kung fu tricks and whatnot. But the thing is, if you have used something like Gemini with the input of image, and you apply that to a humanoid, now all of a sudden you can ask the humanoid to do things for you, right? Apply actions. And that's the moment where these things can then also start fixing your toilet, replacing possibly parts of the work that a plumber is doing today, fixing your electricity stuff, all of that, basically. So even those jobs will be impacted by the AI. So what that ultimately means is that whoever controls AI has a monopoly and control over all of these jobs, and this gives them a lot of power. And who is trying to gain that power? Well, we have big tech that is investing heavily into a race and comparison of who has the largest data center. And now you have Meta, for instance, that 2 or 3 days ago announced that they would create a data center that is called Hyperion that would be the size of Manhattan. But not only the size of Manhattan, it is also consuming the same amount of energy like whole of Manhattan. That it's about 5.7 gigawatts that you require to power the city and that you require to power this data center. Here we see the nuclear facility in Switzerland, the largest nuclear facility in Switzerland. It only powers and outputs about 1.5 gigawatts. So you see the scale that this whole thing is starting to get. Ultimately, this does not really matter that much as long as there is alignment, right? So if all of this technology is being used to support you, to help you make your lives easier, it's all good and fair. And if we take the context of a corporation, it's quite easy to understand how they could possibly use this against you. They have the mandate to just generate shareholder value, so that's basically what they will try to do, right? Extract as much value as possible from you. And this can come in various forms, but the easiest is basically to bias your decision with the outputs that they would provide to you, so that you may be not taking the product that is the best fit for you, but maybe the product that they want to push because they have a margin on that. But it goes a little bit further than that, because all of these companies ultimately are located in a country, and those countries are run by politicians, and politicians all have a very similar trait, which is this need to have more and more power, right? Regardless of wherever they are. So more power, more control. And what ultimately can happen, and has happened in a recent case, was like here, where you had the International Criminal Court that was investigating something that Trump didn't really like. And ultimately, Trump then forced Microsoft to cancel this gentleman's account, right? So if they can force a company to cancel accounts, they can also force a company to basically get all of the information, change the narrative, push their messaging, and whatnot. And this weaponization might be harmless in good times, but there is also bad times. So we should really be aware of these things. So LLMs are already getting everywhere, but this is also evolving because they're incredibly useful. So I'm not talking against this piece of technology. I think it's a great breakthrough, just to set the record straight there, right? They're incredibly useful and helping us. So they're also being used more and more in different contexts. And we can already see how, for instance, Professor Rasker at MIT is thinking about the evolution of what is actually happening, right? Today we have ChatGPT, you ask it things, you get output back. So you can get summaries, research, and whatnot. Now, we already start seeing first evolution in forms of agentic AI. So not only research can be done, but also actions can be performed for you. So basically, first research the leads that I want to approach, and then go after one lead after the other and call them, right? And have a conversation with them. All of this can be already automated today. But the next evolution of that is basically having something called a decentralized AI, which basically means that you no longer have agents interacting with websites, but agents interact with other agents. So now all of a sudden, if we take the analogy of how the internet and web was born, we now reach this internet stage. And then what they're proposing now at MIT, and by the way, if you're into this stuff, you should definitely check that out, is a project called Nanda, which is a open standard for these agents to be discovering each other and also how to talk with each other. There is another nice development when we're talking about open source, which is that more and more the performance of closed source versus open source models are converging. So I don't have now the latest data. This is now from last year. But what you can basically see is that the open source community is definitely pushing a lot for these models to become way more accessible. The big problem, however, is that you still need the compute to run that, right? And you would end up in a situation like this where you say, okay, let's go for decentralized AI, but at the end of the day, although on this higher level, everything is super decentralized, on the lower level, we have just infrastructure from AWS running everything. So we need a paradigm shift. And this is where I'll be talking a bit more about my project and what we're doing there, because I do believe that the answer to this problem actually lies in your pockets. And it is the mobile phone. Now you may wonder, okay, I always heard that these LLM require really big hardware and servers and whatnot. Now you're coming up with these mobile devices. Well, turns out that these mobile devices are actually where a lot of R&D is being put in. Apple alone makes more than half of their revenues from the iPhone piece of hardware alone. So not the iPhone and the app stores, not the iPhone and the iPad, so just that iPhone alone. They spent about 33 billion in R&D every year. This means that effectively, this device that you have in your pockets is the most engineered piece of hardware out there. It is also the most decentralized piece of hardware out there. People churn through these devices very easily and very quickly, right? There's people that change the device every single year. This translates to more and more devices being put into the world. Already today we have 7 billion smartphones globally. We're 8 billion people, so we will surpass the amount of people that we have with mobile devices. The other thing is, because people churn through these, the vast majority of compute, unlike people think, is actually not in data centers, but in mobile devices in your households. And these are the numbers here. You have about 13 million servers being shipped every single year, and you compare that to the 1.4 billion phones. They use the same silicon, ultimately. So you see that there is a order of magnitude more silicon being put into mobile devices. But that's not why I'm so excited about mobile devices. My background is in mobile security, and that's why I really fell in love with these devices. Security is usually very boring until it isn't. In this case, all of us that have a mobile device in our pocket are actually carrying around a super engineered and super secure hardware security module. Now, that piece of hardware is the thing that allows you to do mobile banking without being scared if you forget your phone in a taxi. But what that thing can also do is it provides you something called a trusted execution environment. So you gain two properties from this. On one hand, you know that the hardware and hence the compute is real. So this is really important if you try to run a decentralized compute network, because if there is a way to cheat the system by virtualizing, by emulating, or by simply faking the amount of compute that you have, people will do that, right? They will use that against you because that is the path of least resistance and the maximum gain for them. So you need to come up with a solution that enforces them to use real hardware. with these chips, that is a solution to that problem. The other thing is also the confidentiality. So the devices have something called a trusted execution environment. What that effectively allows you to do is that I can offload to someone my workloads, and I don't need to care about those people operating and executing the stuff for me because they cannot inspect the workload that I'm sharing with them. And this is also very important in the context of a decentralized cloud, because otherwise enterprises would never start utilizing something like this if they know that their data is being leaked with the public whenever they utilize these services. You may wonder how that looks like. We now have more than 103,000 devices on the network, and it started by people just onboarding their everyday device during the night. Then people realizing, wait a minute, I have more than one device, so upcycling those devices that they had in their drawers, then to realize I might also ask my family, and then to ultimately also go on the secondary market and buy devices that have some sort of defects, like cracked screens, no microphone, and so on and so forth. Now, how does this translate to LLMs? Well, the limiting factor when running large language models is mostly the RAM. So it's not necessarily the actual GPU, it's not necessarily the actual CPU, but it is the RAM. These devices already today have a unified architecture where the GPU and the CPU both are able to talk to the same RAM. So you are able to run already today on Accurist large language models of up to 14 billion parameters. So that's already quite a decent size. But if you want to go beyond that, you will need to use something where you shard the model into multiple devices. And what we see here is basically a community member who upcycled just main boards from Samsung devices. So these are S22 or 23. And what you see here as well is that you have 160 cores, 20 GPUs, and about 240 gigabytes of RAM. So now all of a sudden you can start running really large models on these. Obviously this comes at the overhead of communication between the model layers, but it is actionable and you can utilize it. So that's basically what we're at the moment also researching and developing over at Accurist. That was the whole Accurist bracket, but ultimately you don't really need Accurist to be able to run confidential and self-sovereign LLMs. What you need, however, is on one hand a TEE that will be completely shielding and keeping confidential your conversation with the LLM, then open source, and here is also where Web3 plays a big role, because Web3 will make the whole thing completely auditable and traceable so that people understand what they're actually utilizing when running their LLMs. And I even would have a demo that I recorded, but I'll be able to also probably show you the real deal. But basically already today you can start on Accurist these LLMs and then talk to them just like you're talking with something like ChatGPT. So, key takeaways. Let me wrap up here. LLMs will impact all jobs. No matter what others tell you, I personally believe that there is nothing that will not be impacted. I'm not saying that everything will be replaced and we will have to find other things to do, but probably our time will be invested in different things that we're investing in today. Monopoly and ultimately centralization can be dangerous if there is no alignment. That's why alignment matters so much. We haven't even talked about the alignment of the AI itself, meaning that as soon as AI starts self-improving, maybe they start losing the purpose that the humans wanted and start gaining their own purpose, right? So alignment matters also on that front, but mostly alignment between you and the company that you're sharing your data with, but then also the government that oversees that company. And confidentiality absolutely matters. Another topic here, now, besides the fact that you could be sharing really sensitive information with these models that can then and will eventually be used against you, this is also one of the main blockers why enterprises are not utilizing today LLMs at a larger scale, right? Because they do realize that if they start just indexing and sharing all of their data with these LLMs, they lose something, right? And confidentiality brings exactly that aspect back. So there is also a business aspect to confidentiality. And last but not least, the combination of TEs, open source, and Web3 offers us a solution where we as humans can still fully get all advantages of this technology without being held hostage. That's it. Thank you so much for listening in. I hope this was interesting for you. Thank you.